He called me from his honeymoon. "Are you okay, Mom? Don't call back. We're trying to enjoy ourselves." And then I heard her, his new wife, laughing in the background. "Ask her if she needs another blanket. Might get cold in there." That night I stared at the motel mirror. And for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. But what they didn't know was this. That same night I made a quiet promise. I would get back everything they took from me. Not just my home, not just my name, but my dignity, my voice, my peace. Stay with me. Because this isn't just a story of loss. It's the story of how I reclaimed it all. My name is Lorraine Baxter. I'm 73 years old, and until recently I thought I knew what security felt like. I thought it was something you built and protected like a home. 4 walls you kept standing with grit and grace. I used to believe that if you worked hard, loved harder, and kept your promises, the world might just return the favor. But life, I've learned, isn't a ledger that always balances. I was born and raised in Michigan back when towns still moved to the rhythm of factory shifts and Sunday sermons. Grand Rapids was where I lived most of my life and where I raised my son, Ethan. I came of age in a world that didn't expect much from women like me. Working class, soft-spoken black, and barely 20 when I married. But I had strong hands and a stronger will. That turned out to be enough. For almost 4 decades, I worked at the General Motors plant. First on the line installing brake systems, then later welding and eventually supervising quality checks. I wore steel-toe boots until they felt like part of me. My hands were always dry, cracked, sometimes bleeding in winter. There were days I couldn't feel my fingers from the cold, but I never once called in sick. I couldn't afford to. Frank, my husband, was the one with the jokes and the patience. He used to call me Lo, short for Lorraine, but also because I was always low to the ground with both feet planted and no time for nonsense. We made a good team, until cancer took him when Ethan was just 10. That year, everything changed. I still remember the hospital room, the way Frank tried to smile even as his body failed him. He passed on a Thursday morning. That night I packed Ethan's lunch, set his clothes out for school, and sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the seat my husband used to fill. I had 1 paycheck coming, no savings to speak of, and a little boy looking at me like I held the whole world together. So I did what women like me do. I got up, tied my hair back, and went to work. Ethan was everything to me. Bright, curious, polite. He had a way of looking at the world that reminded me why I kept pushing forward. When other kids started rolling their eyes at their parents, Ethan still hugged me before school, said thank you every time I made dinner. He never asked why we didn't take vacations or why his clothes were from the thrift store. I think he understood more than I ever gave him credit for. We didn't have much, but what we had was ours. The house I bought with Frank, 2 bedrooms, a sagging porch, faded blue shutters, became my anchor. I paid off that mortgage $1 at a time. Every squeaky floorboard and chipped tile had a memory attached to it. The Buick in the driveway, old and stubborn like me, got us through winters most folks wouldn't dare drive through. It wasn't just a car. It was the thing that took Ethan to school, to his first job interview, to college tours. It held our lives together. I remember standing in the kitchen one night. Ethan was 17, watching him eat leftover meatloaf while reading a brochure from the University of Wisconsin. Bamman Samson Banand. I got in, he said barely above a whisper. His eyes lit up. Then they clouded. But we can't afford it, can we? The truth sat heavy in my throat. Tuition was more than I made in a year. But I smiled. Let me worry about that baby. In 2009, when the economy tanked, the plant reduced hours, overtime vanished, pensions got hit. Still, I had options. I cashed out my 401k, every penny I'd set aside for retirement. I sold Frank's life insurance annuity. I even dipped into a small savings account I kept tucked away in a coffee can behind the canned corn. That was supposed to be for emergencies. But wasn't this one? I remember the banker looking at me funny when I signed the withdrawal form. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you sure you want to do this? Once it's out, it's taxed, and..." I'm sure I said, "It's for my son." That afternoon, Ethan cried in my arms. He kept saying, "I'll pay you back, Mom. You won't have to lift a finger once I graduate." I didn't want repayment. I just wanted him to have a chance I never had. I wanted the world to see what I saw every time I looked at him. Brilliance, potential, goodness. He went to school out of state, and I wrote him letters every week. Real ones. Pen on paper. Sometimes he'd reply, sometimes not. I told myself he was busy. That's what young men do. They chase the future and forget where they came from for a while. I forgave it because that's what mothers do. Years passed. He graduated, got a good job in Chicago, then Denver. I watched from afar, proud but distant. Our calls turned into texts, then less. I'd send him messages. "Thinking of you, sweetheart. Made your favorite pie." Some he read, some he didn't. Still, every Sunday I made fried chicken, the same recipe Frank loved. I'd mash potatoes, snap green beans, set 2 plates at the table. I never stopped hoping Ethan might walk through that door, smile that crooked smile, and say, "Smells like home." He didn't. But I kept setting his place. Because I believed in tradition, in faith, in the power of showing up even if no one else did. The house got quieter over the years. But I didn't mind. I found peace in routine, sweeping the porch, washing linens, ironing hand towels. They were little rituals that reminded me I was still needed, even if only by the walls I had painted myself. That Sunday evening, I remember it so clearly now. I was standing at the stove wearing my faded red apron with the frayed edges. The chicken sizzled in the cast iron skillet. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, painting the counter in gold. Everything felt normal, comforting. I didn't know not yet that a phone call was about to break through the silence. That in just a few moments my whole world, the home I built with my bare hands, the son I raised with everything I had, would slip through my fingers. I didn't know that the person I trusted more than anyone else was already making moves to erase me from my own life. But that night I still believed in him. I still believed that love, real love, could hold back betrayal. I just didn't know how wrong I was. It was a Sunday evening not unlike dozens before. The fried chicken had just come out of the skillet. The table was set as always. 2 plates, 2 glasses, a folded napkin by the second chair that hadn't been used in years, but never got put away. I just lit the candle in the center, a little ritual I started once Frank passed. One flame to carry the memory of 2 people who once sat across from each other. That's when the phone rang. I reached for it without thinking, half hoping, half dreading. Maybe it was Ethan calling to say he'd stop by after all. Maybe he wanted to surprise me. I answered with a smile already forming. "Hey, baby." But his voice stopped me cold. It was clipped, businesslike. "Mom, I sold the house. And the car. Everything's handled." I froze. "What, I sold the house last week? The car, too. I've already transferred the title. Someone's coming by tomorrow to handle the move. You'll be staying at a motel for now." I couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about, Ethan? This is my home." There was silence on the line. Then he said it, flat and sharp. "It was in my name. Remember the paperwork you signed when I was handling your bills? You gave me power of attorney. This is legal. Tomorrow you need to be out. I booked you a room at Sunset Inn for a week. That's more than fair. More than fair." My hands started shaking. The room spun around me. "Ethan!" "What? Why would you—" "I'm getting married tomorrow, Mom. I need a fresh start. I can't take care of everything anymore. You understand?" He didn't say Mama like he used to. Not even Mama. Just Mom. Cold and sharp like a formality. "You're not coming to the wedding," he added after a pause. "It's just not a good time." And just like that, the line went dead. I stood there, the scent of fried chicken still in the air, the candle still flickering between 2 plates. But there was no second chair anymore. just a ghost. The next morning, a white van pulled into the driveway at 8 sharp. A man stepped out wearing a clipboard around his neck and a blank expression on his face. "Mrs. Baxter?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm with Horizon Moving and Storage. We were told to begin itemizing and clearing the home. You've been booked for a stay at Sunset Inn for 7 nights. After that, you'll need to make further arrangements." He handed me a form. I didn't even reach for it. What does itemizing mean? He didn't look up from the clipboard. "We've been instructed to separate belongings into 3 categories: sell, dispose, or store. No mention of ask her. No mention of sentimental. Just 3 choices. They moved like machines. They placed stickers on things I had touched for decades. My wedding photo, me and Frank smiling in front of the church, was peeled from the frame and tossed in a bin labeled discard. The quilt my mother sewed when Ethan was born marked for donation. My Sunday dress, the one I wore to Ethan's graduation, the one I wore to church every Easter, it was stuffed into a black trash bag like it meant nothing. I tried to protest, but they waved the clipboard. Everything was approved by the power of attorney. Your son signed off. That piece of paper, I remembered it now. It had been 3 years ago. Ethan had offered to help with bills. It's just to manage utilities and bank statements, he'd said. Nothing big. I didn't ask questions. I trusted him. He was my son. I never imagined he'd use that trust to erase me. By noon, the house had lost its warmth. The framed Bible verse that used to hang above the kitchen window was gone. The teacups from my grandmother's cabinet, boxed and labeled for estate sale. Even the little mat at the front door that read "Bless This Home" was folded and shoved into a pile marked "Garage Misc." The only thing left untouched was the couch where I had fallen asleep hundreds of times after double shifts still in my factory boots. Even that looked smaller now, like it no longer remembered me. The movers asked if I needed a ride. I shook my head. I still had my dignity thin as it was. I packed a small suitcase, zipped it up slowly, as if by moving slowly enough time would give me back what had just been stolen. Before I walked out, I turned one last time and looked at the living room. The light still streamed through the curtains I had sewn by hand, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like someone else's house now. A stranger's walls. A stranger's floor. I stepped onto the porch, the one Frank and I built together one summer when we didn't have money for a vacation. We had sanded every board, painted it ourselves. He used to sit here with coffee, and Ethan would play with toy trucks by the steps. Now it was just me, standing in front of a house I no longer owned, a past I could no longer touch. I whispered goodbye, not because I thought anyone would hear me, but because some part of me needed to say it out loud. Then I walked away. No tears, no outbursts, just silence, because sometimes silence is the only thing left when love has been weaponized against you. Room 114 at the Sunset Inn. Smelled like something between bleach and old cigarettes. The kind of smell that clings to your skin long after you've left, like a memory you never wanted to make. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, yellowed from years of smoke and neglect. A single window looked out over a cracked parking lot where a broken soda machine blinked in the dark, half-lit and buzzing. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, my suitcase still zipped untouched. I didn't unpack. I couldn't. Something about opening it felt too final, like admitting I no longer had a home to return to. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, back stiff against the worn headboard, staring at a television I never turned on. The room hummed with silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but heavy. Like it knows what just happened to you and is offering nothing but empty space in return. There was a scratchy blanket folded at the foot of the bed and a Bible in the drawer, just like the ones I used to place in the guest room back home when Ethan came to visit. Except this wasn't a guest room. And it wasn't my home. Not anymore. The next morning, someone knocked. I opened the door and found a teenage delivery driver holding a greasy pizza box. I hadn't ordered anything. "Prepaid," he mumbled, handing it over. Inside the box was a pepperoni and mushroom pizza. Lukewarm, almost cold. The smell hit me first. Mushrooms. I'm allergic. Not deathly, but enough to make my throat itch and my stomach twist. Tucked under the box was a little folded receipt with a note scribbled in the corner. Enjoy. E. No love you. No sorry. Just that word. Enjoy. I put the box on the desk and sat back down. I didn't touch it. Later that evening, the phone rang. I picked it up before it finished the second ring, some part of me still hoping for a mistake. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he realized what he'd done. Hey, Mom. Ethan's voice came through too casual. Just checking in. You're okay, right? I sent you some food. I didn't speak. Anyway, we're heading to Cabo tonight for the honeymoon. Don't call, okay? Chantel wants to unplug. I heard a laugh in the background. Chantel. Then her voice close enough to the phone that it felt like she was whispering in my ear. Ask your mom if she wants another blanket. Might get cold in there. Laughter. Click. I held the receiver in my hand long after the call ended. I stared at the wall across from me, at the faint outline where a painting once hung and had been removed. Even the shadows on these walls had a history I didn't belong to. Later that night, I went into the bathroom to wash my face. The mirror was foggy at first. I wiped it with a towel slowly. And there she was, a woman I didn't recognize. Her eyes were hollow, sunken deep with something that looked like betrayal but felt even worse, like erasure. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Her hair, once carefully wrapped in rollers each Sunday, was now flat and fraying at the edges. Her skin, dry and lined, didn't glow like it used to when she laughed around her son. I stared at her for a long time until my knees ached from standing. I raised a stranger, I whispered. Then I closed the light. I sat back on the bed, reached into my purse, and pulled out the old worn Bible I'd carried since Frank's funeral. The corners were curled, some verses underlined, others faded by time and touch. I opened it, not to read, not to pray, but to hold it, like a talisman, like an anchor. My hands gripped it so tightly the leather cover bent beneath my fingers. I wasn't looking for comfort that night. I was looking for a reason to keep breathing, a reason to not disappear completely. Because if a son could erase a mother in a single phone call, I had to believe something bigger still saw me. I had to believe I still mattered, even if only to myself. The days passed in a kind of gray that had no beginning or end. I stopped checking the time. I stopped listening for the phone. I ate saltines and sipped tea I made with lukewarm tap water from the bathroom sink. At night, the hum of passing cars outside the motel became my lullaby, though I rarely slept. Then on the fourth morning, something changed. It wasn't a grand sign, not thunder or scripture, just a window. A smudged, foggy window with a cracked corner, the kind that only opens halfway. I'd sat in front of it for hours, watching nothing, expecting even less. But that morning I saw her. She was maybe in her late 70s. Thin, frail, wearing a pale pink cardigan that hung too loosely on her frame. She was walking slowly across the parking lot, holding a small beige purse to her chest, like it carried the last pieces of her life. Behind her trailed a younger man, late 20s, maybe early 30s. His walk was casual, but his eyes were sharp. He wasn't helping her. He wasn't checking on her. He was watching her, like a hawk watches something it's already decided to take. She turned just slightly and smiled at him, the way a mother smiles. I know that smile. I've worn it. It says I still believe in you even if you've given me no reason to. Then it happened. So fast. He grabbed her purse, yanked it with such force she fell to the pavement. Her head hit the asphalt with a sickening thud. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stared up at him, dazed, clutching nothing. He ran. No one chased him. The world didn't stop. A car honked as if annoyed she'd fallen in its path. I stood at that window frozen. But it wasn't her face that haunted me. It was her eyes. They were hollow, not from the pain of the fall, but from the knowing. That the person who took from her wasn't a stranger. That it was someone she once held as a baby, rocked to sleep, fed with trembling hands. Those were the same eyes I'd seen in my mirror just days ago. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I finally stepped back from the window, something inside me had shifted. The sorrow didn't leave, but it had changed, hardened. It had grown teeth. What I felt wasn't just grief anymore. It was clarity. For days I had believed my story was an isolated tragedy. Something unique, humiliating, maybe even my fault. But watching that woman, I understood the truth. This wasn't just my pain. It was a pattern, a quiet epidemic no one talks about. Sons, daughters, nieces, neighbors, people using love as a weapon. Signing papers for convenience, selling houses for the family, moving money to help, all done behind soft voices and forced smiles. They call it elder financial abuse in articles. But it doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like erasure. And it happens every day. I sat back down on the bed. My Bible was still beside me. I picked it up, flipped through the worn pages without reading. Then I whispered something I hadn't said aloud in years. God didn't abandon me. He's waiting for me to stand up, because if he hadn't left that woman in the parking lot, if he let me see her just in time, then maybe, just maybe, he was giving me a reason to stop hiding behind hurt. I wasn't ready to forgive Ethan, but I was done waiting for him to see me. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time since the call, I brushed my hair properly, put on a clean sweater, dabbed a little foundation on the parts of my face that had started to look hollow. And then I walked, not toward the house that wasn't mine anymore, but toward something else. The Grand Rapids Public Library sat at the edge of downtown, a place I used to take Ethan when he was little. Back when stories were safe, and we still believed happy endings were just a matter of time. That morning I stepped through its doors not to escape, but to search, because if no one was going to protect women like me, then I had no choice but to learn how to protect myself. I used to think libraries were places for children and students, quiet corners where stories lived on shelves and curiosity came in the form of brightly colored covers. But that morning, the Grand Rapids Public Library became something else entirely. It became my battlefield, my war room. The walk from the motel to downtown took nearly 40 minutes. I passed gas stations, shuttered storefronts, and one too many payday loan signs. My feet ached by the time I stepped through the glass doors, but I stood a little straighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't walking toward loss. I was walking toward something that might give me a way forward. I hadn't used a computer in years. The last time I tried, Ethan had to help me set up an email account. He had laughed, not cruelly, but with the kind of condescension sons sometimes adopt when they forget who taught them to tie their shoes. Since then, I'd stayed away. But that day I sat down in front of one of the public terminals, hands trembling slightly, and stared at the screen, like it was a locked door I had to learn how to open. I started with simple words. Son sold my house without permission. Then I tried power of attorney fraud. Then elder financial abuse, Michigan. Each time I pressed enter, the screen filled with results. Articles, legal blogs, government documents, news stories. My eyes jumped from phrase to phrase. Unauthorized transfer of assets, misuse of power of attorney, restoring guardianship rights, financial exploitation of the elderly. I clicked on one, then another. I started printing things out, but I quickly realized I couldn't afford the cost of every page. So I started writing. On anything I could find. Napkins from my purse, the back of motel receipts, corners of an old church bulletin that had been crumpled in my coat pocket. I scribbled notes furiously, names of laws, toll-free hotline numbers, quotes from judges, and the titles of relevant case studies. Somewhere in the middle of this frenzy, I realized I had created a kind of map. Not a perfect one, not yet, but something to follow. Something that said, you are not crazy. You are not alone. And this was not your fault. I looked around and noticed a young woman shelving books near the computer terminals. She was small, quick on her feet with thick black hair tied in a braid down her back and a name tag that read Nina. Her movements were efficient, but there was a softness in the way she handled each book like they were living things. She noticed my pile of notes, ink smudged on thin napkins and torn corners, and offered a gentle smile. "Doing some research?" she asked. I hesitated. I hadn't said anything out loud to anyone since the motel check-in desk. "My son sold my house," I said, the words tumbling out before I could edit them. "I gave him power of attorney years ago. Trusted him. Now everything's gone." Her face didn't change. Not with shock, not with pity, but with something deeper recognition. "That happens a lot more than people realize," she said softly. "You're not the first person I've seen here looking for answers like that." I felt something stir in my chest. Relief, maybe? Or just the strange comfort of being seen. "Do you know where I could get help?" I asked. "Real help, I mean, not just articles." She nodded, pulling a sticky note from her back pocket and scribbling down a name and address. "Wayne County Senior Legal Aid," she said. "Ask for Tamara Fields. She's a legal aid attorney who specializes in elder cases. She helped my aunt last year when her son tried to take her pension." I took the sticky note with both hands as if it were made of gold leaf. Tamara Fields. I repeated, memorizing it. "Wayne County. She's smart," Nina added. "And fierce. Not the kind of lawyer who'll hand you a pamphlet and walk away." I smiled for the first time in days. Not because I felt safe, but because I finally had a thread to hold on to. "Thank you," I said. "Really? You're not alone, Miss Baxter. Lorraine Baxter." She nodded. "Well, Miss Baxter, you've already done the hardest part. You started." She moved on, cart full of books, leaving behind nothing but her name and that little square of paper I now clutched like a lifeline. I stayed at the library for hours. I went through court documents, read blog posts from elder law experts. I took notes in tiny handwriting and rewrote them later to make sure I could read them again. I kept everything, even the napkins, especially the napkins. By the time the sky turned orange outside the windows, I had built a file. An unofficial dossier of sorts. Notes about durable power of attorney, details about fiduciary abuse, even stories from other people who had been betrayed by their own children. One woman wrote, "My son told me I was lucky he let me stay in the guest room of the house I paid for." That's when I called the lawyer. I slipped every scrap of paper into a plastic grocery bag I found beneath the desk and carried it back to the motel like it was sacred. When I reached room 114, I emptied it all onto the bed and arranged each piece carefully, like puzzle pieces that could somehow fit into justice. There were moments that night when the fear crept back in. What if I don't have enough proof? What if the law takes his side? What if they tell me this is just family drama? But louder than those questions was another voice, one I hadn't heard in years. Mine. It said, "You raised that boy. You built that home. You earned every inch of what was taken from you. And now it's time to take back your name." I turned off the motel lamp, the sticky note from Nina still resting on the nightstand. For the first time in weeks, I didn't fall asleep in dread. I fell asleep planning. Not hoping Ethan would call, but hoping Tamara Fields would answer when I did. The Wayne County Senior Legal Aid building was tucked between a community health clinic and a laundromat. Nothing fancy, just brick and modest glass windows, with a faded decal of a balanced scale on the door. But to me it might as well have been the Supreme Court. I stood outside for a moment, palms damp, clutching the grocery bag of notes, napkins, and printed articles like it was armor. It was strange how something as simple as a building could feel like the start of a war. The waiting room was quiet, filled with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of paperwork. A woman at the front desk asked my name and offered me a clipboard. I filled out the form with shaking hands, checking, "Yes," next to "Are you a victim of financial exploitation?" It was the first time I'd seen the word on paper with a box beside it, and the first time I felt steady enough to check it without shame. "Tamara will be with you shortly," the woman said kindly. "You'll like her." I wasn't so sure. I didn't need to be liked. I needed to be believed. Tamara Fields walked into the room 15 minutes later. She looked younger than I expected, no more than 35, wearing a navy blazer, no nonsense, but her eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. She extended her hand, firm but warm. "Mrs. Baxter." "I'm Tamara. Come on back." Her office smelled of lemon disinfectant and coffee. There were stacks of case folders on the desk, post-it notes with scribbles in neat handwriting, and a framed diploma from Howard Law. She gestured to the chair across from her, then sat down with a legal pad. "I understand your son sold your home," she said. "Not with pity, but with precision. Can you walk me through what happened?" I opened the bag and began to pull everything out. Napkins, printouts, a highlighted brochure about elder rights, the sticky note with her own name on it that Nina had given me. I told her everything, every detail I could remember. How I cashed out my 401k in 2009 to pay for Ethan's college. How I signed power of attorney forms without really understanding them because I trusted my son. How the car and the house were put in his name for convenience, and how he promised I'd always be protected. I showed her the photo Chantel had posted publicly after they kicked me out. Her standing in front of my house, cocktail in hand, with the caption, "So happy to be free of the old burden." Tamara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you have a copy of that image? I printed it. I slid it across the desk." She studied it for a few seconds, then nodded. "That caption alone tells a story." I continued. I told her about the pizza Ethan sent, the mushrooms I was allergic to, the phone call that ended with "Don't call, we're on our honeymoon," the movers who threw my husband's wedding photo in the trash, the motel, the smell, the silence. When I finished, Tamara put down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Sam, this isn't just morally wrong," she said, tapping the folder. "This is textbook elder abuse. And from what I see here, it's also potentially criminal." My breath caught. I had expected her to say it was complicated, maybe even a matter of family of misunderstanding. But she didn't hesitate. "He used the power of attorney to transfer your assets," she said. "That's a fiduciary duty. He's legally obligated to act in your best interest, not his, and selling property for his gain without your informed consent. That's not just unethical. That's fraud." She took a breath, then began listing our next steps. First, she said we send a formal cease and desist letter to both Ethan and his spouse. We'll demand the immediate return of any funds gained from the sale of property. Second, we petition to revoke the power of attorney. Third, we file a civil complaint for damages. And fourth, if necessary, we notify the Attorney General's office. It felt like a script from someone else's life. The words were so heavy, so official, that I wasn't sure where I fit into them. "What about the Buick?" I asked quietly. "That was still in my name." Tamara paused. "Then the sale was illegal. He transferred something he didn't own. That alone is enough to get us leverage in court." She wrote a few more notes, then looked up again. "I know this is a lot to take in, but Mrs. Baxter, you're not powerless. You are a witness. You are the owner of a story that was twisted without your consent. And now we take it back." For the first time since Ethan's voice rang through the phone saying, "It's all mine now," I felt my spine straighten. I wasn't just a mother who had been cast aside. I was a plaintiff, a witness, a woman with evidence strategy and something no one could strip from me. Truth. Tamara handed me a printed summary of our plan. "Let me do the fighting. You just keep showing up." I nodded slowly, folding the document into my purse. On the way out of the office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. I still looked like the woman from the motel mirror. Older, tired. But now there was something new in my eyes. Focus. Because I wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. I was preparing to win. The plan came together on a Tuesday just after lunch. I was sitting across from Tamara at her office again, a fresh mug of coffee in my hand. my bag of notes tucked neatly beside me like an old friend. By now, I no longer felt like a woman lost in legal language. I felt like a soldier learning how to wield it. Tamara had her laptop open, her fingers moving fast over the keys. "I've been reviewing all the documents we pulled from the county registry and probate records," she said, not looking up. "And something came up that might be the crack we need." She turned the screen toward me. A scanned copy of an old insurance policy filled the frame. Frank's name at the top, a policy date going all the way back to 1984. I squinted. "That's Frank's handwriting. It's a life insurance policy your husband took out through his union job," Tamara explained. "It was never claimed. It's worth $20,000. And it's still in effect." I stared at the screen. "I never knew." "That's the point," she said. "Your son doesn't know either. Which means it's clean." I frowned. "Clean." Tamara leaned forward. "It's bait." The idea felt dangerous. Not in a physical sense, but in the kind of way that makes your chest tighten and your hands sweat. I'd always played fair, even when people didn't. I raised Ethan with honesty, with kindness. But what he did to me, it wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. It was cold calculation wrapped in the language of love. If he could use paperwork and loopholes to take everything I had, then maybe it was time I used the truth to show who he really was. Tamara saw the hesitation on my face and softened her tone. "Mrs. Baxter, this isn't a trap. You're not luring him into anything he wouldn't do naturally. We're just giving him a stage to speak plainly. And you'll record it legally. Michigan is a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, it's admissible." I exhaled, deep and steady. "All right, tell me what to say." That evening, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, phone in handscript in mind, heart pounding like I was back in high school before a big speech. Tamara had coached me, keep it simple, keep it soft, and let him talk. I pressed the button and waited. The ring barely finished once before Ethan picked up. "Hey, Mom?" His voice was surprisingly casual, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been kicked out of my home and stuffed into a roadside motel, like forgotten furniture. I tried to sound unsure. "Hi, baby. I was going through some of your father's old boxes. In the closet, you know, where I kept the church programs and his watch." "Okay. And I found this envelope. It's from some insurance company. I think it's a policy. For when he passed." He was quiet for a second. "What kind of policy? I don't know. It says 20,000. I don't know who I'm supposed to call or what to do with it." He cleared his throat. "Don't worry about it. Just send it to me. I'll handle everything. I thought maybe I should talk to someone at the office, or—" "No, Mom," he cut in. "Seriously, don't try to figure it out. Just send it to me and I'll take care of it. It's easier that way." There was a pause. Then, as if he thought I was hesitating for the wrong reasons, he added, "Put my name on the claim. I'll get it processed faster that way. It'll be safer. Safer." That word burned. I repeated it in my mind even after I told him, "Okay," and ended the call with a thank you so soft it made me sick. I sat there in silence for a long while, the phone still in my hand, staring at the blank wall in front of me. There was no satisfaction, no victory dance, just confirmation of everything I feared and everything I now understood to be true. I met Tamara the next morning and handed her the recording. She listened with earphones expression blank. When she pulled them out, she smiled. Not out of joy, but out of certainty. He just hung himself with his own words. She added the file to our case folder, then looked me in the eye. "He asked you to commit insurance fraud. You were hesitant. He insisted. This is gold." For the first time, I allowed myself to say it aloud. My son was never going to do the right thing on his own. Tamara didn't nod, didn't offer sympathy. She handed me a fresh copy of the complaint draft instead. "You ready to take the next step?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. Because the woman who picked up the phone the night before had been a mother, But the one sitting in front of Tamara now, she was something else entirely. She was a witness, and she was ready. There's a moment, just before the truth comes out, when time feels like it's holding its breath. That morning, I sat in Tamara's office and felt that moment stretch across the room like a taut wire. Everything was prepared. The files had been printed and stacked with care. Her voice recorder, already tested, sat on the table beside 2 pens. There were glasses of water untouched and a small notepad with 3 names written at the top: Lorraine Baxter, Ethan Baxter, Chantel Lynn Baxter. Tamara glanced over at me. "If at any point you want me to pause or stop, just say the word." I nodded, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore, because I knew something now that I hadn't known in all the months since the betrayal. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be spoken, clearly, steadily, and with conviction. At exactly 10:04 a.m., the door opened. Ethan walked in first, dressed in a blue dress shirt I recognized from our trip to Chicago, back when he still called me Mama. His hair was neatly styled, shoes shined. He looked composed, successful, detached. Chantel followed behind him, designer handbag swinging on her arm, nails, perfectly polished sunglasses still perched on her head, as if this were a lunch meeting, not a legal one. She gave me the briefest glance before settling into the seat across from me with a sigh of impatience. Ethan forced a smile. "Thanks for seeing us, Tamara. Let's go ahead and get that insurance process started." Tamara didn't return the smile. She adjusted her glasses and opened the folder. Her voice was even calm, like someone reading a recipe with measured precision. "Before we proceed, I'd like to review a few items relevant to the current legal circumstances surrounding Mrs. Baxter's property, financial accounts, and personal security." Ethan blinked. "Sorry, I thought this was just about the policy." Chantel rolled her eyes. "You didn't say there'd be paperwork." Tamara ignored both. She slid the first document across the table. Exhibit A, signed documentation showing the full withdrawal of Mrs. Baxter's 401k retirement account in 2009. This amount, totaling $62,417 was used to pay your undergraduate tuition at Michigan State University. Ethan frowned. That was over a decade ago. "She gave that to me. She didn't give it." Tamara corrected. "She sacrificed it. That's what the courts will see." She moved to the next sheet. Exhibit B, durable power of attorney form signed by Lorraine Baxter, dated August 2018. Filed under the assumption of routine bill management. No legal counsel present. No secondary witness. Granted full control of assets and decision-making authority. Ethan glanced at me then, just briefly, but I said nothing. Exhibit C. Tamara continued. Is a digital capture of a social media post made by Chantel Lynn Baxter, dated 2 days after Mrs. Baxter was removed from her home. The caption reads, "So happy to be free of the old burden." The photo shows Chantel holding a cocktail in front of the Baxter residence. Chantel's mouth opened. It was a joke. "No." Tamara interrupted, tone unchanged. "It was evidence." She placed the next document in front of them. Exhibit D, a certified DMV report confirming that the 2010 Buick LeSabre was registered solely in the name of Lorraine Baxter at the time of its unauthorized sale. The buyer reported no secondary signatory. Funds from the sale were deposited into an account belonging to Ethan Baxter, not Mrs. Baxter. Ethan started to speak, but Tamara raised a hand. "Exhibit E," she said, and reached for the recorder. Audio recording taken during a phone conversation initiated by Mrs. Baxter. In it, Mr. Baxter advises his mother to send him a life insurance policy under his name, states it will be easier, and instructs her not to involve outside agencies. She pressed play. My voice came first, unsure, soft. "I found this insurance paper in Dad's things. I think it says 20,000. I'm not sure what to do." Then Ethan's reply, clear as day. Just send it to me. Don't talk to anyone. I'll take care of it. Put it in my name." The silence afterward was thick. Chantel turned to Ethan, visibly rattled. "You told me it was yours. That your mom signed it over?" Ethan's face flushed. "I didn't think she remembered it. It was old from Dad's job. She never mentioned it." "She didn't have to," Tamara said sharply. "It wasn't yours." They began to unravel right there at the table. Chantel jabbed a manicured finger in Ethan's direction. "You said it was clean," she snapped. "You said she didn't want the house, that she agreed to everything." "She signed the form," he hissed. "She didn't understand what you were doing," Tamara said, her voice finally rising for the first time. "And you knew it." The room became a storm. Ethan stood up, face red. Chantel stood too, grabbing her bag. "You lied to me," she said. "We planned our wedding off that money. We furnished the entire house. It's not even our house," he shot back. "It's hers." And there it was. Finally. The words that had been missing. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, eyes fixed on the center of the table. When the shouting stopped, Tamara turned to me, waiting. I stood up slowly, looked at Ethan, then at Chantel. "You thought I was empty," I said quietly. "Disposable. Like a bill you forgot to pay, like furniture that gets sold off when it's in the way." They said nothing. "But I worked in a factory for 38 years, I continued. "You remember that, Ethan? You used to sit in my lap when I got home, even though I still smelled like grease and metal. I taught you how to take things apart. Radios, fans, your old toy trucks." I took a breath. "Well, I still remember how. And I just took this whole lie apart, piece by piece." Ethan looked down. Chantel turned away. Tamara closed the folder with a soft click. "This meeting is concluded. You'll receive formal communication through the court." They left without saying goodbye. And I stayed behind, not to cry, not to collapse, but to breathe. Because for the first time since that awful phone call, I didn't feel discarded. I felt ready. Ready to finish what I started. Ready to reclaim every part of the life they thought I'd forget. Justice didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in the form of a thin envelope slid through the mail slot of the motel room where I had been living for over 5 months. Inside, a stamped and signed court ruling. Notarized. Sealed. Unmistakable. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff, Lorraine Baxter. I held the paper with both hands and sat down slowly on the bed. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. Because even though this moment was quiet, it was monumental. Every penny Ethan had taken. Every lie, every manipulation, every "don't worry, Mom, just trust me," had finally been weighed, measured, and called what it truly was. Theft. Tamara had told me the numbers weeks before, but seeing it in writing was different. $182,000 in total. Broken down into fair market value of my house at the time of sale. Compensation for the illegal sale of my Buick. Punitive damages for breach of fiduciary duty. Restitution for emotional distress and displacement. I'd spent my life counting nickels, holding onto grocery store coupons, saving fabric scraps to patch quilts instead of buying new blankets. And now the court had placed a dollar value on something I didn't even know they could my trust. Ethan had to sell his new house. The one he and Chantel had posted photos of online. The one with the granite counters and the Mr. and Mrs. welcome mat. It went on the market less than 2 weeks after the ruling. Quiet listing. No open house. No celebration. I never stepped foot in that house. I never wanted to. Because no matter how polished it looked, I knew what had built it. Me. And now piece by piece it was being dismantled. Sold to repay the woman he thought would stay silent. Tamara called me to confirm the funds had been transferred. She handled everything with her usual calm professionalism, but even she paused before hanging up. "He called," she said softly. I waited. He asked if I'd deliver a message. He said, "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I didn't know what I was doing." But he had known. When he signed the forms. When he tossed out the family photos. When he told me not to call because he was on his honeymoon, he knew, so I didn't respond. Not then, not after. A week later, I got a voicemail from Chantel. Her voice was softer than I remembered, not smug or sarcastic like before. Mrs. Baxter. Lorraine. We didn't think it would go this far. Ethan's not sleeping. He's lost weight. Please, can we talk? She didn't leave a number, just said, please think about it. I did. And then I deleted the message. Because I had thought about it. For too many nights in too many motel rooms, replaying too many conversations where I swallowed pain just to keep the peace. I wasn't angry anymore, but I was finished. With the settlement money, I bought a car. Not to show off, just something modest. A gray sedan with good gas mileage and heated seats. The smell of the new interior hit me as soon as I opened the door, and I cried, not because it was fancy, but because it wasn't his. This was mine. I spent 2 weeks touring rental listings until I found it. A 1-bedroom cottage in a quiet suburb 20 minutes from Grand Rapids. White siding, a front porch, and flower boxes under the windows. The rent wasn't cheap, but it was fair. And more than that, it felt like peace. When I walked through the door for the first time, the landlord handed me the keys and said, "It's yours now." And I believed her. I furnished it slowly, carefully. A soft couch. A table with 2 chairs, even though I mostly ate alone. A bookshelf I filled with secondhand novels and my old church Bible. I hung up a photo of Frank and me on our wedding day, this time in a real wooden frame. Not the plastic one that was tossed into a moving bin like garbage. Every item in that home told a story. Not of what was lost, but of what had been reclaimed. Even the kitchen felt like mine again. I found myself cooking for the first time in months, roasting vegetables, baking cornbread, even making chicken and dumplings on Sunday just because I wanted to. I didn't set the table for Ethan anymore. I set it for myself. The walls were painted soft green. I picked the color myself. The porch had a rocking chair. I sat in it every evening, tea in hand, and watched the wind move through the maple tree across the street. And for the first time in my life, I rewrote my will. Tamara sat beside me again now, more like a friend than an attorney. She had drawn up the documents herself. My hand hovered over the line where Ethan's name used to be. I drew a line through it. Slowly. Clearly. And in its place I signed something new. The Lorraine Baxter Foundation for Elder Justice. A portion of my estate would go to support free legal aid for seniors facing exploitation, so no one else would have to beg a librarian for help with a napkin and a Google search. Nina from the library cried when I told her. She offered to help design the logo. Tamara offered to be the first pro bono legal partner. "Your story's going to help more people than you know," Tamara said, holding the signed form in her hands. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because I hadn't done this for applause. I'd done it for the woman who stood in a motel mirror and didn't recognize herself. I'd done it for the mother who gave up everything and was told she didn't matter. And most of all, I'd done it for the woman I was becoming. One choice, one boundary, one yellow front door at a time. On the night I moved into the cottage, I lit a candle on the windowsill. I didn't do it out of habit or grief. I did it as a promise. To myself. Because the world may have stripped away my house, my name, even my son's affection for a time. But it hadn't taken the most important thing, my worth. And every corner of that new home whispered it back to me. It started with just 3 of us. A folding table in the back room of the Grand Rapids Library, a plate of cookies I baked that morning, and 2 women who, like me, had once believed silence was the only response to betrayal. No banners, no speeches, just a circle of chairs and a small sign taped to the door. Support Circle. For seniors experiencing financial harm. Nina sat beside me, clipboard in hand, pen tucked behind her ear. She'd insisted on helping. Every Tuesday afternoon she showed up early to set out chairs, arrange handouts, and greet each person with a warm smile that said, "You belong here." The first meeting, no one spoke for the first 15 minutes. We just sat sipping weak coffee and listening to the clock tick. And then, out of nowhere, a man in his 70s, Harold, took a deep breath and said, "My daughter put me in a facility while she moved into my condo. I haven't seen my cat in 9 months." He cried right there in front of us, and none of us flinched, because every person in that room knew what it was to be betrayed by someone you once tucked into bed. By week 4, we needed more chairs. By week 7, the local paper ran a story titled, "Lorraine Baxter Lost Everything. Then founded a place where no one feels alone." I didn't expect that. I didn't even know the journalist was in the room until after. She had come with her grandmother, quiet in the back, and stayed after, to ask if she could write about what we were doing. I said yes, not because I wanted recognition, but because I wanted reach. Someone out there somewhere was still hiding in shame, thinking they were the only one. Maybe this would help them find us. The Lorraine Baxter Foundation grew slowly then, all at once. Tamara guided the legal side, helping file nonprofit status and connect us with elder rights organizations. Nina handled community outreach and social media, setting up a tiny website that included resources, downloadable guides, and a contact form that started receiving messages from all over the state. People didn't just want help, they wanted to heal. And healing, I learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's someone saying, "I haven't told anyone this before." Sometimes it's someone laughing for the first time in months. Sometimes it's just someone showing up, shaking, unsure but present. One Tuesday, about a year after our first meeting, a woman walked into the room, late 70s gray scarf wrapped tight around her neck, eyes darting nervously from face to face. She didn't sit at first, just stood near the coffee table wringing her hands. I walked over and offered her a cup of tea. She took it with trembling fingers. "I'm not sure I should be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know where to begin." I looked into her eyes, wet, wide, terrified, and gently reached for her hand. "You've already begun," I said, "because you came. You walked through that door. That's the hardest part." She nodded, blinking fast. "Now," I added softly, "let me help you find the next part." That woman came every week after. She never missed a meeting. And each time I watched someone new find their footing, I remembered the motel room, the cracked wall, the cold pizza, the way my name was used to sign me away. They tried to erase me, but I wrote myself back in. One word, one step, one truth at a time. Now I sit at the head of that circle each week, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a guide. I don't ask for thanks. I don't need applause. What I need, I already have. My name, my story, and the quiet, unshakable peace that comes from helping others write their way home. If this story touched something deep in you, maybe a memory, a quiet hurt, or a truth you've never said out loud, know that you are not alone. Have you ever felt overlooked by the very people you gave everything to? Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to take your story back? If so, I hope you'll stay with us. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that might speak straight to your heart. Because here, every story is a reminder your voice matters. Your sacrifices are seen. And it's never too late to reclaim your worth.